It was a particularly chaotic morning, the rush to get out of the house, the drop off at
Mhm.
daycare, at school, the whole 9 yards. I am dysregulated. I'm stressed out. I can feel my heart beating. I'm going to be late. The kids are whining. Nobody's putting their shoes on. No one's doing what they're supposed to do. We were driving to school. I had to make a phone call, and the kids were just like on top of each other, just pure chaos. I reached a point where I slammed on the brakes. I turned around and I screamed, "Shut up." I was just so full of rage, like red hot anger, rage, like not in control of myself. And the look of sheer like terror on their faces told me everything that I needed to know. I knew that I was their mom, and as their mom,
Mhm.
I'm supposed to be their safe place, not their first bully or their first place where they're afraid or the place where they don't feel comfortable to be themselves or where I rule by fear.
Hey, 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 and welcome back to the Calm the Chaos Parenting Podcast. Today, we are digging into our past. We are talking about breaking the cycle so that our kids do not have to heal from their childhood like many of us did or are still doing. I have been following my guest for quite some time, and I'm super excited to have her on and introduce her to you because she talks about all things motherhood and really the honest side of motherhood and removing that shame, that guilt, the overwhelm, talking about mental load, all those things. And lately she has been doing a lot on breaking the cycle. So for any of you who've been curious, what is a cycle breaker? How do I break the cycle? What are the ins and outs? What do I need to know? I got your gal. So Libby, I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am really looking forward to this conversation, which I know sounds weird to a lot of people, being like, you want to talk about your trauma? And yeah, I do. I've learned in my life that being honest and actually facing the hard things is actually what helps for us to figure out the answers and to make things better. That's what I do on my channels every day and in my writing and in my speaking. I just want to be honest about my life and
Mm.
my circumstances and my past and my values and be honest about it all so I can then address my life and say what needs to change in order for me not to feel like a basket case all the time. What do I need to change in order to feel better, to do better, to be the mom that my kids deserve?
Mm. I love that. And can you just, for people who don't know who you are, can you share a little bit about who you are and why you're so passionate about breaking the cycle?
So my name is Libby Ward. I am a mom of two. My kids are now 7 and 9. I became a mom during a time when everybody was showing their highlight reel, and I was trying to keep up with all of those people. And I met my own demise when I became burnt out after my second child. And I realized through that time that I had been living according to the world's expectations and trying to do everything and be everything for everyone for so long that I became a shell of myself. And I became the exact type of mom that I did not want to become. When I became a mom, I thought, I'm not going to repeat the cycle. I very intentionally, not everyone does, but I knew from the get go, I'm going to do things differently. And I wanted to be different. And I wanted my kids to trust me and to respect me and to have a safe home and I wanted to be a person that helped them to know that they are safe and loved and seen and known. And through my own burnout and overwhelm, that's when I started being dysregulated and when I yelled more than I wanted to and when my moods became unpredictable and I became the type of mom that was unpredictable and that did do the things that I didn't want to do. And it was through looking back at my childhood and back at my trauma and looking at my current circumstances that made me realize I need to wipe the table clean and focus my energy where it needs it most and not on what the world says I should be doing all the time.
Mm. And I was going to ask you, what were the signs that kind of let you know that it was time to do something different? But you shared that a little bit. For
Mm-hmm.
people who are listening, if they think that this is just what motherhood is. I remember growing up in my mom's, we yell. That's what we do. We're Italian. We yell. And so when I was a yelling mom, I just thought I was supposed to yell because that's what my mom did. And my brothers and I, we just fought because that's what siblings do.
Yeah.
And so it took me a while to realize, wait a second, this isn't how it has to be. What was like your moment that helped you realize, or what would you share for people who are listening, like that they could be looking out for?
I would just first off validate that what you just shared is a very common experience, that so many of us were raised in yelling households that we just internalize and embody. That's just how I am. That's just how our family is. Oh, that's being Italian. Oh, that's being this. And it makes a lot of sense as to why we think and feel and say those things. But for me, I realized that I didn't like feeling dysregulated. I didn't like yelling. I didn't like my house being a place that felt unpredictable. When I was a kid, I walked around on eggshells around my mom, and I had to be very careful about what I said and when I asked for things and how I said things. And I had to be on my best, and I had to always be prepared for the worst. And so I spent so much of my energy catering to the moods of my mom and the people around me that it really robbed me of a lot of my childhood. And I never felt like I was able to go to my mom to talk about ways I had been hurt or things that she had said or done that hurt me, because it was like, they're the parent, you're the child, there's no questions asked. And then you become a parent and you realize, wait a second, I don't know what I'm doing. Here I was being told and seeing that my parent was like in charge and I wasn't, and I thought they knew what they were doing. But you get to parenthood and you're like, we don't actually know what we're doing here. And I wanted to show my children that I was an imperfect human too, that I can apologize when I make a mistake and model what it looks like to do that. For me, the signs, I can tell you a story of the first time I realized that I was becoming what I didn't want to be. And it was when my eldest was about 4, my youngest was about 2. It was a particularly chaotic morning, the rush to get out of the house, the drop off at daycare, at school, the whole 9 yards. I am dysregulated. I'm stressed out. I can feel my heart beating. I'm going to be late. The kids are whining. Nobody's putting their shoes on. No one's doing what they're supposed to do. And we were driving to school and I had to make a phone call, and the kids were just like on top of each other, just like pure chaos. And I reached a point where I like slammed on the brakes and I turned around and I screamed, shut up, or I don't know. I screamed something that I'm not proud of. And I was just so full of rage, like red hot anger, rage, like not in control of myself. And the look of sheer like terror on their faces told me everything that I needed to know. And I knew that I was their mom. And as their mom, I'm supposed to be their safe place, not their first bully or their first place where they're afraid, or the place where they don't feel comfortable to be themselves, or where I rule by fear. And were they maybe doing some things they weren't supposed to? Absolutely. But do I want to be the type of parent whose children only listen to her because she scares the living daylights out of them? And do I want the impact of that when they become adults and then don't trust me and can't come to me and don't trust themselves and suppress their emotions and become people pleasers and become children who become adults who don't know themselves and trust themselves because for their whole life they had to suppress their needs and emotions and their experiences and not hold other people accountable because they were too afraid of emotions? No, like I want them to know and love and trust themselves, and they learn to do that through me knowing and loving, and respecting them. And so it wasn't like a switch went off and I like all of a sudden wasn't a yelling mom. Obviously, that's literally impossible. But it was seeing the fear on their face and realizing that that's not
That's what I
the
was.
relationship I wanted.
That was what I was going to ask next, is kind of like, obviously you didn't go from like this way to that way. It doesn't happen overnight. And so someone listening to this could be like, oh my gosh, that's me. That literally just happened to me this morning. And then they go, okay, what next? What do I do? And I also assume, so I'd love to talk about what next? What do you do? But I would also assume that there's a lot of shame and a lot of guilt that then enters in. And it's like, why are you doing this? You should be doing a better job. They are depending on you and you're not showing up in the right way. I can imagine we get flooded with all of that before we can actually do anything different. So,
Oh, 100%. And it's the guilt and the shame that we let eat us alive that actually, for me, stopped me from doing anything. Because when you make
mm-hmm,
a mistake, you do something you're not proud of, and you feel shame keeps you from wanting to share that with others. It keeps you from wanting to be honest about it. It keeps you from wanting to be accountable because it brings up more feelings of shame. So what do? We feel ashamed and then we hide it and we shove it down and we stuff it down and we pretend it's not there and we ignore it till it happens next time and then we feel more shame and so our mistakes and the things we're not proud of layer on with shame and it becomes so hard to then face. So for me, facing the shame and facing the reality of how I was behaving and how it didn't align with my values was the hardest part and the most important part.
mm-hmm,
And once I worked through the shame, then I could actually look at why am I so triggered by these things? Why am I overreacting? Why am I over why do I become so dysregulated so easily? Asking those questions then helped me to find the tools to regulate. It helped me to realize I was given those tools as a kid. It helped me to think of different things I could do in my day that could help me to regulate and make things a little bit better. But I couldn't get to the information. I couldn't get to the data of the feeling, right? I couldn't get to okay, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What can I do about this? If I only ever let the shame tell me what to do. I had to really work through that shame and face up to it.
And so, someone listening to this, it sounds like by facing that shame, which you can do through some of those great questions you just shared, that's a lot like what you have in your journal, where there's questions to help parents, especially moms, be more aware of their own feelings and emotions that are attached to that shame and overwhelm. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I actually have it here. So I want to talk about one of the prompts in the journal. So in the morning there's like a 5-minute guided journal prompts section and then the evening it's about another 5-minute prompted section. And in the
Mm-hmm.
evening I have this section that's called Get Some Grace. And at the beginning of that section it says I am feeling guilty for, and so you would write down what you're feeling guilty for. And a lot of times we talk about mom guilt, right? We talk about how we have guilt for going to the grocery store alone, taking a break, yelling at our kids, all these different things that we feel guilt for. And what I've realized in
Mm-hmm.
my life is that it isn't actually always guilt, right? Guilt is a useful tool and emotion for helping us see when we've done something wrong so that we can change and do better. But oftentimes we say we
Mm-hmm.
feel guilt for things that we haven't actually done wrong, right? Going to the grocery store alone isn't wrong. That's more either society's expectations or your kids crying or like different things that like you feel a discomfort, but you haven't actually done anything wrong. And so in this
Mm-hmm.
section of my journal, I try to help moms see, is this something that you need to feel guilt for so you can then find a solution? Or is this something you don't need to feel guilty for? So you write down, I'm feeling guilty for blank. And then there's 4 check boxes and it says, and so I need to. So after you write down the thing you feel guilty for, let's say it's going to the grocery store alone. Do you need to give yourself grace and try again tomorrow? AKA, did you do something wrong and you need to try again? No. Do you need to give yourself grace and apologize? No, you didn't do anything wrong by going to the grocery store. Do you need to give yourself grace and seek out tools to improve? You didn't do anything wrong. Or, I don't need grace. This guilt is not necessary or productive. That's that.
Mm-hmm.
You scream in your child's face and dump all their
Mm-hmm.
toys out all over the floor because you're angry and they didn't clean up in the time you told them to, or whatever it is, something you're not proud of, something that doesn't align with your
Mm-hmm.
value system, you can say, okay, I'm feeling guilty. What is it telling me? Do I need to give myself grace and try again? Do I need to apologize? Do I need to seek out tools to improve? Maybe it's all three. And going
Mm-hmm.
through this exercise helps you to stop, look at the thing you feel guilty for, ask yourself, what is that feeling telling me? And then either it lets you let go of the guilt or it lets you move through it to say, what can I do differently next time? I like to think of it as energy we spend. So it takes a lot of energy to shame ourselves and guilt ourselves. If you ever think of those evenings when you're just like eating yourself alive over something you did that day, right? Like you spend the whole evening being like, I'm such a terrible mom. Like I should have done this. I should have done that. That's all energy that we spend.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like to think of it as we only have so much energy to spend. We can either spend it eating ourselves alive for a mistake we make, or we can spend it doing something differently, seeking out a
Mm-hmm.
tool to improve, engaging in self care, engaging in a conversation with a friend who might help you to move through the emotions. Just sitting and
Mm-hmm.
stewing in our shame and our guilt doesn't get us anywhere. So why not use that energy to bring us to how can we actually do better next time?
Mm-hmm. I love how you're breaking down exactly how to manage this feeling that's coming up for us and identifying, is this something we actually need to do? We need to do something differently? Or do we need to just say, wait a second, this is not a necessary guilt or shame that I'm placing on this? I love that breakdown. And I think that brings us back to this breaking of cycles, because I feel like a lot of that is coming from these expectations, things that have happened in our past. And so we're saying, my mom never left me. So I left my kids and went to the grocery store. Therefore, I'm not supposed to, right? Or something like that. Like these expectations that were put on us. Can you just explain just a little bit when you talk about cycle breaking? What do you mean by
Mm-hmm.
that term?
Mm-hmm. So when I say cycle breaker, I think of any person, even not parents, right? There, sometimes we can be breaking cycles and it has nothing to do with our kids or we don't even have kids. We're just saying we're not going to do this anymore. For example,
Mm-hmm.
say your mom dissected her body and the way she looked your entire life. And every time you turned around, she was hiding her body, is saying that she felt ashamed of herself. She was making comments about her body. You could say, I'm going to break the cycle. I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want my worth to be tied to what I look like. Yes, that is something we can pass down to our kids, but that's something we can break the cycle within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But when I think of breaking the cycle, I think of literally any behavior, any way of being in our lives and in our parenthood that has happened in generations before us that we no longer want to happen. You are trying to stop that from reoccurring. You're no longer subscribing to, well, my mom did it, so I'm going to do it. Well, my family's always done it this way, so I'm going to do it. Well, my mom hit me and I turned out
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote fine, so I
Mm-hmm.
am going to spank because I was spanked. I went through significant and varying degrees of abuses and neglect and big T trauma as I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And when I became an adult, I looked at the world as you're either traumatized, you're not traumatized. You had a bad childhood or a good childhood. Your parents were awful or they were amazing. And I had this like very black and white view of
Mm-hmm.
our childhoods and then how we parented. And what I've realized over time is that it isn't like that. It isn't just
Mm-hmm.
this good and bad. You're not just a good mom or a bad mom. Your parents weren't just good or bad. We all had varying degrees of things that happened to us, and there's various behaviors and ways of being that we don't want to pass on to our kids. So you can be a cycle
Mm-hmm.
breaker who was raised in a loving home where your parents loved you and did the best they could, but you no longer want to do some of the things that they did when you were growing up. You don't want to be a
Mm-hmm.
yelling family. You don't want to be a spanking family. You don't want to
Mm-hmm.
be a family that sends their children to their bedroom to deal with their emotions alone. You want to do things differently. And so you're trying to break that cycle, trying to break the cycle of
Mm-hmm.
emotional invalidation. So a cycle breaker
Mm-hmm.
is really anyone who is breaking the cycle of a harmful or toxic behavior to varying
Mm-hmm.
degrees.
And what would you say, what are some of the first steps there? Like, one, is it just acknowledging that this is part of your past and it is affecting your present and your future? Is that step one? Or would you start somewhere else?
Absolutely. If you look through any change, big or small, that's happened throughout history, every single time it starts with awareness. Awareness of the problem, acknowledging the problem. It's not even the action, it's the, oh, wait a second. I just noticed. It's noticing. I
Mm-hmm.
noticed the look of fear on my children's face. I noticed that when we're running late, it feels like my house is caught on fire. My nervous system is telling me the house is on fire, everyone's going to die. And so when I notice that feeling of like, why do I feel like the world is about to end when literally we're going to be 2 minutes late for preschool and no one is going to notice? Like my body's reaction
Mm-hmm.
to what is happening is not lining up. And so you talk about breaking the cycle. It sounds like this big, huge concept of I can't do that. it's so big, it's so hard. It literally is the act of paying attention to our lives, paying attention to our feelings, to our triggers, to the things that upset us, to the things that make us go off, and asking that feeling, what is it trying to tell me? Is a boundary being crossed? Am I being reminded of something from my childhood? What's actually going on here? And it almost never starts in the moment, noticing something and then having a solution. It literally starts with, I'm going to choose to pay attention to how I'm feeling and ask myself why. And that's why I love the journal, because as moms, as we know, there are so many things going on all the time. To actually have the time in the middle of a tantrum to stop and go, what am I feeling? What is it trying to tell me? What should I do next? It's the most ridiculous thing in the world. Like, we don't
Yeah.
have
No,
time.
I always tell people now is not the time. It is
No,
not happening in the moment. Yeah.
no, maybe in the
Totally
moment, the first time you're going, oh, I notice it feels like the house is burning down. And then later at nighttime, once the kids are asleep, you can open up your journal and be like, why the flip did my body tell me that the world was ending when really it was this very small thing that happened? And that first time you might like kind of dig a little deep and then be like, I don't really know. But then it's a practice. The more you do it, the more you pay attention. And in my words, be honest. That's the whole play on honesty for me, is the more we're honest with ourselves, the more we take the time to consciously notice our feelings and what they're trying to tell us, the more it becomes second nature. The next time you'll be able to dig a little bit deeper. The next time you'll dig a little bit deeper. The next time you might even be able to dig a little deeper in the moment. And when I think of breaking the cycle too, I think of this like circular thing that keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, right? And it's not a matter of, oh, you're going to break the cycle and it's done and your kids are never going to have any problems and you're a perfect parent and yay, we're all done. No, like, for your child's entire childhood and for your entire life, you are a cycle breaker. You have to practice noticing your behaviors and your emotions and asking them what they're trying to tell you. And it gets a little bit easier and a little bit easier, and it's not linear. And you can make changes. And then you'll look back over time and see how much progress you've made. But the thing with being a cycle breaker is there's no arrival. And I think, especially for those of us who are raised in certain ways, who have like perfectionistic tendencies and who just want the solution and just want it to get better, we think, oh, when am I going to arrive? Like, when is this going to be easier? Like, when is it going to come natural? You're never going to just arrive. And if you ever think you've arrived, then you definitely have some cycles to break, because we're all imperfect humans. But it does get a little bit easier and it comes a little bit more natural to realize what our feelings are trying to tell us when they're happening, the more we practice doing it.
What were some common themes that came up for you as you were doing some of this journaling? And I do recommend that everyone get Libby's journal so that you can use this, because I get that question a lot. Is I like the idea of journaling, but I don't know what to journal. And the way that you're breaking this down and the questions you're having people journal about is actually, it's not just journaling for the sake of journaling. It really is journaling for the sake of healing and becoming more self-aware. And so when you were doing this work, initially, and I know you said it's ongoing, you're still doing it, but what were some of the common themes that were coming up of what your feelings were trying to tell you? Like some of the reasons why you were getting so upset or you were doing the thing that were there common things that came up?
There was it changed over time. I would say big, more conceptual things were my priorities and expectations. So if my expectation is that I should be able to go from waking up to being out the door with two kids under 4 within 20 minutes, that's a ridiculous expectation that I have. And if that is causing me to be dysregulated, then I need to stop and go, maybe I need to wake up earlier. And if that sounds unrealistic, maybe I need to go to bed earlier. And if going to bed earlier seems unrealistic because there's too much to do, maybe I need to knock off some things off my cleaning list because I'm being too hardcore about what needs to be cleaned. It's like this snowball of, I feel like when we're overwhelmed in motherhood, it's this whole idea of everything is so hard, I can't change it, there's too much pressure on me, all the things all the time. And when you really pay attention and when you really get purposeful about what am I expecting of myself? What are my priorities? Sometimes there's things that you can take away that like you maybe didn't notice. But to be more specific and like less conceptual about priorities and expectations, some of the things that my feelings would be telling me would be like if my children were being noisy and it was causing me to be overwhelmed. Sometimes
Mm,
that feeling was a trigger from my past of I never felt like I was able to be a child. And I never felt
mm,
like I was able to be irresponsible and silly and free and fun. And something about seeing my kids do that triggers something deep, deep within me that I didn't get to have. Sometimes my children being noisy and triggering me is literally that I have been with them for 12 hours straight. I have not had a break. I have not slept well in years. I haven't seen my husband in 4 days because he's been on shift work. Oh, the feeling is telling me that I'm not having my basic needs for autonomy and rest met. It's not that my
mhm,
children are terrible. It's not that I'm terrible for not being able to cope with it. It's not that anyone's terrible. It's that the literal circumstances of our
mhm,
lives are causing me to be overwhelmed, and maybe we can readjust things to get me a break. I don't need to blame or
mhm,
shame anyone. I just need to say what can change, what can be different here. And so it's everything from the big things to the little things of the very same thing, overwhelm from noise. If you pay attention to it and you ask, almost like asking yourself, like asking the feeling what it's trying to say, it can point to different things. That's why I think of it as a practice where it's like every day being like,
mhm.
what was causing that? What was causing that thing?
And I can hear some people might be saying, like, I still don't understand how I'm going to figure out that it came from my past. Is there any sort of journal prompts you used, or is there any specific questions? Because I can tell you're really good at being introspective, but I know a lot of us didn't grow up with that. And so we're learning how to be introspective. So are there questions that you might ask yourself to keep going further back instead of just, oh, well,
Mhm.
it's because my kids were loud and I had sensory overwhelm, or, oh, it's because I'm tired and I need to sleep more. Oh, but I can't sleep more, right? Like, how do we get past some of that surface level stuff to go deeper?
I will say first off that in my own journey of healing, I have realized that going deeper isn't always better. And
Mm,
having a deep and thorough understanding of why you are the way you are doesn't automatically make you better at dealing with overwhelm. It helps you have that understanding and maybe give yourself some more grace. But I think I thought that finding more answers would help me to just like
mhm,
magically be better at coping with feelings. And it hasn't necessarily. And sometimes it's literally the tools in the moment that are doing it. It depends what your goal is. If your goal is to go deeper, it really is it's therapy, it's reading, it's journaling, it's introspection. The reason I made the journal is because I know that it's hard for us to be introspective and to take the time to ask ourselves, which is
mhm,
why I have the prompts. So like the first prompt in the day is get aware. Write down a reality that could make your day easier, a reality that could make your day harder. So from the get go, you're automatically aware of, hey, if I get a little spirally over this thing, it makes sense because of XYZ. Like
mhm,
it really is a practice of day by day. There's no one thing, one answer that's going to help you
mhm.
to go deeper. There's books that I can recommend and therapy, but it's hard and it's
Yeah.
hard. It's worth it. And I never want to give the impression that like doing the deep work is just going to magically fix everything either.
Mhm. And I think sometimes it can, like you said, one, you assume because I know the answers, I should be able to do better now. And then it adds that feeling of frustration and guilt again of, oh, I should, the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. And so if we can remove that expectation that knowing is going to suddenly make things better. So how do we move from the knowing, the understanding, the awareness to doing things differently and breaking the cycle and making that change?
Mm-hmm. Slowly, imperfectly, and slowly and imperfectly and consistently.
You
You
mean I
know,
can't fix it tomorrow, Libby? Come on.
I know everyone wants to, but how do I do it? How you do it is you apologize and you don't say, "Oh, I'm sorry I yelled at you, but you shouldn't have." Like the power of
Mm,
care with our children, with anyone, not just our children, with our partners, with
mhm,
our friends, with anyone in life. If we do something that is out of line with our values, if we hurt them, the power of accountability is absolutely incredible. Like I think of my
mhm,
childhood and all the things that my say mom did or didn't do that hurt me in some way or another. and all the times that I was not apologized to, which is never. I was never apologized to.
Mm.
She was the parent, I was the child, and that's just how it was. And I think about even now to this day as a 35-year-old woman, if I were to get an honest, I'm so sorry that I did this. You didn't deserve that. It would mean everything to me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
repair is so incredibly powerful. We need as moms to stop expecting ourselves to get it perfect and allow ourselves to make mistakes while also being accountable to them. Know that you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna yell at your kids. You're gonna do things that hurt their feelings. You're gonna embarrass them sometimes. You're gonna do things that maybe do have some lasting effects on them. But they love you and they wanna be seen and known and loved by you. And so having you be able to say, hey, bud, I'm really sorry that XYZ happened. I'm gonna try this in order to be better. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying. Like, having them know that you see their pain, that's all that any of us want, right? In any of
Mm-hmm.
our relationships, in any time that we've been hurt, we want to know that the person who hurt us sees our pain. And if I can leave parents with anything, it's to know that you're not going to get it perfect, but that your
Mm-hmm.
ability to truly connect with, be honest with, and authentically apologize and repair with your kids will mean everything for your relationship, for their ability to trust themselves and their own feelings, for their ability to advocate for themselves and set their own boundaries, to know what they deserve, to operate in relationships in their childhood and adult life healthily. All of it really hinges on you being able to be accountable and you being able to repair and you being able to model those things. Your job isn't
Mm-hmm.
to get it perfect. Your job is to show them healthy ways of interacting with other humans as they
Mm-hmm.
grow up in life. And the best way to do that is to model it.
Mm. I was going to ask you a question. You kind of just answered it, but I was going to say, you've been doing all of this work. And when we got on, you said you had just finished recording some things for your channels on cycle breakers and breaking the cycle. And so I was going to ask, is there anything that like I haven't asked you? Obviously, there's a lot I haven't asked you about this, but is there anything that you're just like, ooh, I got to talk about this when we talk about breaking the cycle?
I would say that you just need to give yourself grace for being a human. I think so much as moms, we want to do a good job and we want our kids to grow up in a way that they don't have to recover from us. And we
Mm-hmm.
want them to be able to be their authentic selves. And we want to do a good job. And so we strive so much and we try so hard and we give so much, but we're going to make mistakes. And I think a lot of us spend our energy shaming and blaming and guilting ourselves when that energy would be so much better spent with our kids, on ourselves, doing things that are loving to ourselves, which are then going to have a positive ripple effect on our kids.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that I would just leave parents with is spend less time shaming and blaming and more time taking care of yourself and taking care of your
Mm-hmm.
kids and being accountable.
I love that. Can you tell us a little bit about your journal? You've talked about it. You've given us some prompts. I want to make sure that people know where to get it, what they can find in it, because I think that everyone listening to this should go grab a copy.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I would love to read to you the morning affirmation that's in my journal every morning. It goes like this. I'm a good mom because I love my kids and I'm aware enough to know that I can't do it all. Every family, every struggle, and every season of my motherhood is different. And so I won't let one day define what kind of mom I am. My expectations should change with my reality. I'm trying, and that matters. And so I love to start the day with saying that because I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for all the trying that we do and
Mm-hmm.
all the effort we put in. And then in the morning section, as I spoke about, there's an area to get aware, to specifically know a reality that'll make your day easier, a reality that'll make your day harder, I've got a section for getting your priorities straight. So I call it the 3 Ps: choosing peaceful, present, or productive. So many times we try to do it all, right? We're trying to be present with the kids while we're trying to cook dinner, while we're trying to listen to our podcast and get a little me time. And it's literally impossible. Like, you cannot do it all the time. So I try to focus
You
on one.
forgot the cleaning the wet dogs as they
Yes,
come in from going to the bathroom. And then, yeah,
phone
you
and
forgot.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
So like, choose peaceful, present, or productive. You don't need to be present with your kids 24/7. Choose a
No.
15-minute board game or 15-minute play thing that you're going to do with them, and don't spend the rest of your day feeling guilty that you weren't present. Just
Mm-hmm.
do the thing and then move on to the next thing. Let's stop trying to do it all at the same time. And then I've got a get going section, which is a miniature to-do list. And I made it small on purpose because we need to stop putting so many things on the list. 3 must-dos, 3 nice-to-dos, 3 get-to-dos, which is,
Mm-hmm.
get-to-dos are like, what are you grateful that you get to do? The nice-to-dos are things that you could do, but you actually don't have to. And the must-dos are obviously the must-dos. So that's the morning to kind of like set you up for your day. And in the evening, there's a space to get reflective, what you're proud of yourself for, an area to give yourself grace for the things you're feeling guilty for, an area to be positive about something you accomplished. And I love this part, get reminiscent. And it goes, it's so easy to end our day thinking about what we did or didn't do or how we messed up. It's easy to forget the special little moments that made us laugh or felt meaningful. What's a small thing you'd like to remember from today? And I've had,
Mm-hmm.
this is making me emotional. I've had so many times when, before I started journaling, I thought it was such an awful day. And I kept playing over the things in my head and the interactions I had that made me feel shame or guilt or that I wished I hadn't done. And then all of a sudden I get to this section and I go, wait a second. This morning I took my daughter out for a one-on-one date and she shared this really special thing that's going on. And I was able to encourage her in it. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't take the time to do that thing with her.
Mm-hmm.
Totally forgot that we had that really special moment because I'd spent all my time focusing on the negative. And so not only does it make you think about it at the end of the day, you write it down
Mm-hmm.
and then you have this log of all these beautiful moments. And I love that. And then there's an affirmation at the end, which I'll read to you and then I'll stop talking about it. Okay, it says, I can't do it all every day, but every day I do something that matters. I'm not I'm not defined by what I do, but rather who I am. I'm a human who loves her kids, and I deserve as much grace as anyone else. I deserve to be cared for too. I'm a good mom, and I know this because I'm here, I'm aware, and I'm trying.
Mm-hmm. Is beautiful. And it aligns so much with some of the things that we talk about here. People that are listening, that are regulars, are probably going to recognize we talk about celebrating one win a day and finding those breadcrumbs, especially when you're having a really hard day. I think they're even more powerful then because it can feel like you're in the depths and you're never going to make it out. And I like to call them breadcrumbs because I feel like you can follow those little breadcrumbs out to the light and be like, okay, we made it out. We're there. So everything you shared, it's so beautiful. And that's why I think everyone listening should go and grab a copy of your journal and they should follow you on social as well. Can you tell them where to follow you and where to learn more?
Absolutely. You can follow me at Diary of an Honest Mom and my website, diaryofanhonestmom.com. I'd love to see you.
Awesome. If anything has resonated with you today, we got down and dirty talking about breaking some cycles and being more aware as parents, especially as moms, and being honest with ourselves. And so if anything resonated, I'd love for you to message me, message Libby, let us know what landed for you, leave a review and let us know what you'd like to hear more of. And I just want to remind everyone that's listening to this that you don't have to get it perfect, just like Libby said. And this isn't about doing it all and going from 0 to 100 in the next day. It's about finding that next step and then the next step and then the next step. And if all you do is take one step forward or a couple backwards, that's okay too. But give yourself that grace and know that you are exactly the parent that your child needs and you are doing an amazing job. And I just want to remind you of that. And I will talk to each and every one of you on the next episode. Bye, guys.